Okay, so the NBA once again proved its genuine unpredictability this offseason, at least in terms of player movement, as the Utah Jazz shipped Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert off to Cleveland and Minnesota respectively. Both all-stars, both earning massive returns, but while a new player empowerment era may have been ushered in when LeBron James took his talents to South Beach in 2011, player movement has always been a staple in the NBA. However, dating back to the infant stage of the league, rather than the players having control, they literally had none. Coaches and owners ran amok, frequently making impactful and often head-scratching trades. And that's what we're looking at today. There are literally dozens and dozens of trades which massively altered the league at different points in its history. For this video, I've chosen just 4 trades to deep dive on.
Is that it?
Yeah, Jerry, that's it, because each one is a banger. Feels as though we should go chronologically here, so let's travel back to the year 1956. Legendary Celtics shot caller Red Auerbach coveted Bill Russell ahead of the 1956 NBA draft. Unfortunately, them Celts were too good the season prior. They had played their way out of a top draft pick and had actually surrendered their first rounder to take Tom Heinsohn through a mechanism known as a territorial pick. The NBA had some super weird rules back in the day, just go with it. Auerbach was seeking a center who could rebound, start fast breaks, and play strong defense, which wasn't their traditional role. This kind of forward thinking is why he remains a true pioneer of the game, with Bill Simmons writing of Red, quote, "Red anticipating in 1956 exactly where the sport was heading to a T remains his single greatest accomplishment." Meanwhile, Bill Russell was entering the draft from the University of San Francisco. Bill was a 2-time NCAA champ as well an Olympic level high jumper, doing that while battling the racist infrastructure that was still in place in American basketball. The Rochester Royals, who are now the Sacramento Kings, owned the first pick, but they were out on Russell as they were unwilling to pay the $25,000 signing bonus he had requested. Bill knew his worth, man, what a king. Rochester would indeed select Cy Green first overall, leaving the St. Louis Hawks on the board with a chance to grab Bill's second overall. There was just one large issue with that plan.
No, if I'd have got drafted for St. Louis, I wouldn't have won the NBA.
You wouldn't have been in the NBA?
I would not have gone to the NBA.
See, St. Louis as a city remained segregated through the 1950s, and the St. Louis Hawks were a full white team all the way until '61. Bill didn't want them, and it seemed they didn't want Bill. Rather, the Hawks had their eyes set on 6-time All-Star Ed Macauley of the Boston Celtics. Coincidentally, Macauley had reportedly requested a trade to those very same Hawks, as he wished to return to his hometown of St. Louis to be closer to his son. Don't you just love when a plan all comes together? Of course, there was one final hang-up in the deal, as after the original trade for Macauley had been discussed, the Hawks would later demand additionally Cliff Hagan. Hagan was a prized prospect of the Celtics and former NCAA champ. He hadn't played for Boston yet, however, because for 2 years he was serving in the military. What a different world, man. Red would relent and send both Macauley and Hagan to the Hawks in exchange for Bill Russell at the 1956 NBA draft. Later at the draft, the Celtics would draft Russell's college teammate Casey Jones, who along with Tom Heinsohn and Bill would win 8 championships with the Boston Celtics. Bill himself, as we know, would win 11 total rings, including 2 as a player coach in 1968 and 69. The Hawks, meanwhile, would win a title after the trade in 1958. In doing so, became the very last all-white, non-integrated team to win an NBA championship. But I bet they wish they had 10 more of them, don't they? Hashtag regrets. While a savvy trade yearned dynastic results for the Celtics, a much more fortuitous deal kickstarted the Showtime Lakers run. In his first season with the Lakers in 1975-76, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would win MVP, but LA would miss the playoffs with a 42-40 record. Kareem's second in command at the time was Gail Goodrich, 5-time All-Star, NBA champ, and future Hall of Famer. At age 33, Gail would sign a juicy free agent deal with the New Orleans Jazz in the summer of 1976, worth a reported $1.4 million. Oh, and by the way, the New Orleans Jazz would become the Utah Jazz, not the New Orleans Pelicans. So Pelicans fans, you're all right. Jazz fans, you might want to look away. The vision was actually reasonable here for the Jazz, as back in 1974, they had traded a haul for another NBA legend, Pete Maravich.
Still Pete? Damn, that's hot.
You got that right, young Dave Franco. the Jazz were set to enter their third season in the association with a couple Hall of Famers in the backcourt. What could go wrong? It was at this moment the Jazz knew, well, you know the rest. I mentioned earlier that the NBA has had some super wacky rules over the years. Earlier in 1976, a settlement was reached between the NBA and the Players Association, which eliminated a clause in contracts that bound a player to one team for life. Despite this new Oscar Robertson rule, though, the NBA was still trying to impose their will on players switching teams. So when the Jazz signed Goodrich, there was a price to pay. Now, this part of the story is crazy to me because according to Gail Goodrich himself, the Jazz were unaware of any complications that would arise by signing him. They didn't think any compensation would be required, and that the league actually pressured the Jazz into a compensatory trade after the fact. Again, even if the rules were super funky, I have a hard time believing that a team wouldn't know them. This feels a bit like a conspiracy from Gale and the Jazz. The non-conspiracy side of the story is that the league required any team signing a veteran free agent to compensate the team from which that veteran was leaving. And in this case, that meant the Lakers received 3 future first-round picks from the Jazz from 1977 through 1979.
That is a lot of guacamole, a lot of the green.
You ain't lying, Mike, and by the time 1979 rolled around and that final draft pick conveyed, welp, the Lakers had developed into a playoff contender while the Jazz finished a measly 26-56 with both Maravich and Gail Goodrich seeing their game decline. Fun fact about that Jazz team, they were coached by Lakers legend Elgin Baylor. How ironic. Yet another wacky NBA rule would come into play at this point, as from 1966 through 1985, the league didn't have any semblance of a draft lottery. Instead, the bottom team in each conference would literally flip a coin to determine who picked first overall. The Chicago Bulls somehow forgot that
Tails never fail!
And picked heads, losing the coin flip, allowing the Los Angeles Lakers to select Magic Johnson first overall. Irvin would go on to lead the Lakers to 5 championships, and unlike with the Bill Russell trade where the Hawks at least got a single one, the Jazz have still never won a ring. That's tough. Trade number 3 of the video takes us back to the NBA draft, but you know, in the future. Yeah, 1987. This monumental draft day deal in 1987 takes a bit of unraveling, and Knicks fans buckle up. Y'all about to catch mad strays here. In 1986, the Knicks traded for 2-time NBA champ Gerald Henderson from Seattle. In that deal, the two teams would swap 1987 first-round picks. Seattle would have a very surprising season in 87, pushing all the way through to the West Finals. They had a strong playoff run and held that Knicks first rounder, which would end up being 5th overall. Because you know, the Knicks was trash. Anyways, the prize of the 87 draft was David Robinson, who'd predictably get taken by the Spurs first overall. Now, as mentioned, the Sonics did have the Knicks 5th overall pick. The first rounder that they had swapped with the Knicks was actually the Bucks pick originally, which the Sonics had acquired after trading Jack Sikma. So Seattle still also owned their original first rounder, which was 9th overall. TLDR, the Sonics had 2 top 10 picks in 1987, fresh off a West Finals appearance. I really hope they don't fumble this bag. Reports indicated that the Sonics coveted guard Reggie Williams at number 5, but he was taken by the Clippers 1 spot ahead of them. And with that, Seattle changed course. Their new plan was to bolster their front court, which was a reasonable plan considering both Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Hakeem Olajuwon both resided in the West. The Sonics knew that the Chicago Bulls were enamored by a previously little-known forward from Central Arkansas in the NAIA, Scottie Pippen. The Bulls offered to send Seattle the number 8 pick, plus a future second rounder and a future pick swap in return for Scottie Pippen at number 5. And the Sonics obliged. Seattle picked Pippen in order to deal him to Chicago, with a plan in place to secure back-to-back big men at the 8th and 9th pick. The Bulls would draft Odin Polynice out of Virginia for the Sonics, who then selected Derek McKee out of Alabama at number 9. Both Polynice and McKee did enjoy 15-season NBA careers, but, well, you know, to further solidify a day of absolute larceny from the Bulls. At number 10 overall, because yes, the Bulls owned 2 picks as well in 1987, they'd draft Horace Grant, future staple of the Bulls' first three-peat alongside Pippen and Jordan. Crazy, man. The Sonics literally could have walked out of that draft with Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant. Oh, and also, so could the Knicks. Yeah, we already know they traded the pick that would eventually turn into Scottie Pippen, but the Knicks also traded the pick that the Bulls would eventually swap to the Sonics for Scottie Pippen. TLDR once again, the Knicks had Patrick Ewing and at one point had 2 first-round picks in 1987, traded them both, and they could have had Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant, or better yet, Scottie Pippen and Reggie Miller. I mean... Our final trade of the video is once again a draft day maneuver, and y'all probably could have seen this one coming from like a mile away. In 1996, while attending Lower Merion High School in Pennsylvania, Kobe Bryant would win every single national award they could come up with. Kobe's high school coach Greg Downer recalled being surprised yet confident when he heard Bryant declare for the NBA draft, saying, quote, "Part of you is like, did he just say this?" The other part is like, okay, let's go. College or not, Kobe would dazzle at pre-draft workouts, leaving Celtics GM Jan Volk to say, "If you close your eyes and thought a little bit, you might have thought you were watching Michael Jordan." More importantly, Lakers godfather Jerry West reportedly told Byron Scott that Kobe had the best workout he'd ever seen. The only issue with regards to Kobe was that high school players entering the draft was still a rather foreign concept. Kevin Garnett had declared the year prior, but he had the benefit of being 19 years old and a big man. In comparison, Kobe was just a little guard, and also only 17 years old at the time of the draft. Don Vito Jerry West didn't only have eyes for Kobe during the summer of '96 though, as he was also eyeing up free agent Shaquille O'Neal. In order to sign Diesel, the Lakers needed to move some money out, and had a fairly public plan to do so by trading Vlade Divac. Insert the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets were fresh off a 41-41 season, with plans to surround new head coach Dave Cowens with established talent. Though the story has shifted over the years, Hornets head scout Bill Branch insists that the Divac trade was actually agreed upon a day prior to the draft for a player to be named later, and that the Hornets never actually entertained taking Kobe themselves. Charlotte would indeed select Kobe Bryant 13th overall at the draft, with plans to ship him off to the Lakers. But the deal was actually held up for a few days. Turns out Vlade wasn't a huge fan of a proposed move from Hollywood to Mecklenburg County. The future Hall of Famer publicly threatened to retire rather than be traded, but fortunately for the Lakers, he would eventually relent and accept his fate. Charlotte would finish 54-28 with Divac in tow, their best season to date in franchise history. But the Lakers would sign Shaquille O'Neal, win 56 games in '97, and eventually win 5 NBA championships on the back of Kobe Bean Bryant. Gotta be honest, I think the jury's still out on who won that trade.
What is cap?